All right, it is time for us to work on the add data file. What we want to do at this point is to collect data from or collect input from the terminal, then gather it, make it into an object, and then add it to the database. Yeah. And add it to the database. In this place we'll be using the inquiry dependency. We'll be using the UUID dependency. We'll be creating new file. We'll be overwriting file. There's a whole lot that we'll be doing in this file. So I'm ready once you're ready. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is to import everything we need. We'll be needing the FS, the file system module. We'll be needing the UUID module. We'll be needing the inquirer module, and then of course we'll be needing the query DB module. You'll see why all these are necessary in a bit, and I will just paste them in. All right, so this shouldn't look so different. This is the inquirer, this is the file system. Now just for here, we are changing the name of the UUID v4 into v4, into UUID. So we are changing v4 and using UUID v4 instead. Just a sort of convention. You don't have to be bothered about that. Then we are importing the query DB from querydb.js, and that is all. So we'll just get started by creating the function that we'll be using for this file. You really don't have to export this because we are not using it in other file, but I love to export the first file just in case I ever need to use it in the future. So I just do export default, not the first file, the first function. I'll always mix that up. Async function add data. It doesn't need any parameter, so we just it takes in the info parameter. You will recall that the external function that is passed into the query DB here will take in an info variable, which is the data that is gotten from the database. So yes, it takes in the info arguments or variable. All right. Like in the query DB, the first thing I want to do here is to do the try catch block. Boom, just same thing. And what do we want to do here? We just want to tell them that something went wrong, and because something went wrong, there's an error. So we just paste in some code. We've already done this before, so we can just paste it in. All right, cool. Now we're getting closer to the interesting part. I know you're wondering, how do we get to fetch data from the terminal? So that's what we want to do now. We'll be using the inquirer module. So what we'll do is to call on the inquirer. This is supposed to be an asynchronous function. So because it's an asynchronous function, we're supposed to have an await in the front here. Await. All right. Now the inquirer has a method called prompt. This takes the list of questions that we want to ask users. It also takes in the type of input we are looking out for. it takes some other things. Each object of question can give a message, a type, a name. It could give a default value. They could give maybe the lists or choices that they expect the user to choose from and stuff like that. For our case, we just need three, and that is the name, the phone number, and the age, just telling us if this person is an adult or a minor, stuff like that. This will help us to use some of those properties. So it's, you open a and close brackets, and inside there you open a square bracket like this, so that we'll be able to make an array of objects. So just hit enter so that it opens. So what's the first thing we want to make there is the name. Now for the name, the type would be, of course, type of string, right? Yes, type of string, but here we'll call it input. So input is just fine. Then the name, so which name do you want to use and store the data? So name will be fine for me, just name. Then for the message, what do we want to tell the user? We want to ask them to enter their name. So please enter your name, like this. Right, let me just format that so that it falls in properly. Now we've done it for one, and that is for the name. We need another one for phone number. So we just change this. It should be a number. Then phone. Then we'll say please enter your number. That's fine. Then we will do another one. This one now says age, stuff like that. This would be lists, like there'll be list of options, and you say please, are you an adult? Are you an adult? So we just need yes or no for this. So we'll take the choices this time around. Choices, beautiful. And it will take an array of objects. Now inside the array we'll have the name and the value. So the name would be what we want to store when a value is chosen. So the name can be the value. If the name is the same thing as the value, then you don't need to put in the two of them. In fact, all you need are two strings. Let me demonstrate that. So if the name and the string, if the name and the value are different, that's what we are doing now. So we just open, and then we'll put, it will be an array of options. So the option name could be something like adult, should be a string adult, and then the value would be something like yes. Why? Just yes. Then if the person is a minor, so name would be minor, and value would be no. I am not. I think I'm mixing all this up. We are supposed to actually change it this other way. the name is what the user will see in the terminal, and the value is what will be submitted or stored as the value there in the database. So what we'll do is, let's rewrite this. And so name, that is what the user will see in the in the terminal, is y, and the value would be adult. Just copy and paste that, change this to n, which means no, and change this to value of minor. Yes, and that is it. This is what we are looking for. Awesome. So we are not missing anything. Okay, just the comma here. Now we want to store all this in a variable, and that variable is answers. We can use a const, since this will not change after we've fetched it. So equal to await this. All right, just to keep everywhere clean. All right, now with this we can prompt the user for inputs, and they give us inputs. Now what do we do next? We need to organize this into an object. Each value we've gotten, we need to put it into an object, and then now put it into the info info array that we got from the database. All right, so coming down below here, let's set up a variable called data. Now in the data, we want to have something like name would be answers. Now this answers will be an object already, right? So answers does name, the phone number would be answer dot phone number. What do we save this as here? The name. Okay, name is phone, not phone number, so we just use phone here. I think we can also change this back to phone. Okay, then the last one is adults. So answer dot adults dot age. This should be age, sorry. Okay, age. Let's just make sure that all these are in caps. They are well capitalized. Okay, so now we've created an object. We now want to add this object to whatsoever we had in the info. So if coming from the query DB here, if the info is still empty, it will be an empty array. However, if it already has data inside, it will be an array of objects. So what we just want to do here is to add whatsoever we have here in the data into the info. So it becomes info.push. We are pushing this data into this. So .push is a method that's available for arrays. They are used to add new data or new information, new stuff into an array. So we've achieved the first step. The next step for us is to check if the file exists. Now if that file exists, that is the database file, then we'll just add this information. We use this information to overwrite whatsoever we have already in the database. Now you start seeing why it's important that we first of all get this data from the database, because we are going to overwrite it. So when we are overwriting it, we are overwriting it with both the old data and the new data that has just been added. So let's check. The first thing here is check it's going to be an if else statement. So check if the file exists, and we use exist sync, pass in the file, and that is db.json. This has to be a string. Now if it exists, we'll call a function which we are yet to create, and that is add details. So what this function will do, or when we create it, is to take in this data and overwrite whatsoever we already have in the database with it. Now, but assuming that this file doesn't exist yet, we need to create it. And so to create it, we'll use the append method. So we'll go into the else block. Because we know that the file doesn't exist, now let's create the file. To create the file, we'll do fs.append file. It takes in 3 parameters. The first one is the db.json, that is the name of the file, like this. The second one is the content, what we want to pass into it. Something to notice, you can only pass in a string. So if you are passing anything into a file that you want to write into, you need to make sure it's a string. You have to convert it to a string, which is also the same reason why we have to convert it back to the original format when we retrieve it. Now the last thing is like a callback function to check if there's error, and if there's no error, it returns a message. So just function, it has no name. Inside here we have error, and now we say if error happen, log to the console and say something like file creation, or let's do creating file unsuccessful. All right, if it was successful, then we want to go ahead and first of all log to the console and say that file was created. So we can just do db.json file created successfully. Now after this, we can now call on this same add details function. So either ways, we are calling on the add details function, and that is it for this side. For us to, now we missed something. Please, coming up here, we need to add an ID, which is what we use to locate each of these data that we are adding. So we'll come to this place and just call the UUID function, and that is all we really need here. Once we call this function, remember to make this a comma instead of semicolon. Once we call this here, it knows to generate and leave us here with a unique ID. All right, now that is it for this. Next thing is to create the add details function, and we just need to do create and add details like this. This one will take in the info parameter, and that is it. All right, we'll make it asynchronous too. We'll make it asynchronous, and when we jump right into it, all we are really doing here is to overwrite the file that we just created or the existing file with what we now have in the info variable. So to override the file with a new data, what we need to do is do await fs dot write file. Now for a moment, let me explain that the append file and the write file are similar and they are different. They are different in that the append file can create file. They are the same in that the append file and the write file can create files if they are not existing. However, they are different because the append file do not override the data in a file. They only add new data to the bottom of the file. But the write file overwrites whatsoever is inside that file with the new thing you give to it. So if you do not want to overwrite your data or your file, make sure to use the append file. All right, so we want to write to the db.json file, .json. All right, and then what do we want to write to it? Recall that it has to be a string. So that means that at this point we need to convert the info array to what? To a string. So we stringify it, passing the info into it, and then after this just do a callback function inside it has an error. All right, and then now inside the function, if we encounter an error, so let's say there is an error, we could just log to the console and say something like error over, let's say error writing to the database. However, if there are no problem, we just log to the console telling them that, hey, data, this has to be a string by the way, data added successfully. Boom. And that is it. That is all you really need for this file. So to put everything together, we will now call on the query db file, function. Recall that we have to call the function. Now also recall that we have to pass in this function that we just created into the query db function. So call on the add data, and once you call it this way, everything is set. Now what happens here now is when we call on this file, this function, that is the query db, is run. When this query db executes, it executes with this external function, which is the add data function, and as it calls on this function, everything here is executed down to this other part. So the time has now arrived for us to test what we have done and see if it is working fine. So node add data, hits enter, and it says enter your name. That's beautiful. So put Samson, or Sam is just fine. Let's put some number there, and then yeah, Samson is an adult. Whoop, we have an error. So it's telling us that the dbj, okay, the file was created successfully. Data argument must be of type string or of instance. So where exactly is this error coming from? Where exactly are we getting this error from? We got this error somewhere around here. So where exactly? Let's see if I can debug this here. So okay, fs dot write file. Okay, all right, let's go back to here. Okay, okay, where are we getting it wrong? Data must be of type string or instance of buffer. So for that, we converted this to a string here, right? Yes, that's what we did. Okay. Okay. So I just realized that I didn't pass in the info the info array here. So since I didn't pass it down, it's telling me that the data has to be of type string, and well, it's not of type string. It couldn't happen. So let's do that. It's seeing this as undefined, and since it's undefined, this couldn't work properly. But now that I have all that cleared up, let me run this again. So okay, let me go back to the top and start by deleting the file. Control K. And I hope you see that sometimes we could miss a thing or two, and we have to debug, look through our code, and just be sure of what's going on. Oh, okay, my camera is off. All right, so node add data, hit it like this, and so we do not have a file yet there. So let's put in some. All right, then next thing, we'll put in some numbers, and then yes, woo, correct, the db.json file was created successfully and the data was added successfully. That is actually what we are looking for. I had to take a while to debug my code, and I just missed one thing, and there was so much error. Now we have the db.json file which we just deleted. We have some data inside of it, like the one we just created. I could just create one more just so that you see a little of difference. Yes, it's returning some data now because there is now data inside. But let's create one with a beret. Yeah, we'll add some numbers. Ebere, okay, let's say Ebere is a minor. All right, you hit that, and I think there's something we are missing. When we go back here, we are missing a key, H. So, oh, this is supposed to be a lowercase a, I suppose. So let's clear this and try to add it again. So if you notice, it has not been coming in with the right keys. Yeah, it's coming in with the right keys, but not the complete keys. Yeah. So let's say in Joko, hit enter, numbers, hit enter, and this is an adult, hit enter. So what we'll do now is to try to retrieve data. So retrieve data, hit enter, and good. The last one now has it right. So you could just check in a few of these mistakes. Let me just walk you through what this code is all about. All right. So first things first, we had to import a bunch of modules that are very necessary for us to be able to achieve our goal. So the first one is the inquirer, the second one is the file system, third one is the UID, and the last one is the query db.js. All right. The next thing we did was to create and export this function, and like I said, this is actually optional. You could just create an asynchronous function and push through. Next, we collected data from the inquirer, through the inquirer using inquirer.prompt. We made the inputs into a data and added it into the info array that we already had. Then we checked if this file already exists, that is the db.json file. If the database is already there, we just overwrite it with the new data that we have. However, if it is not in existence, then we use the append file to create a new file and then call on the add details function in order for it to overwrite the db.json file. Please make sure you do not forget the info variable, just as I did, and I had to spend some time debugging. Now this is generally how it is for developers. Sometimes you spend hours, days, weeks or so debugging, but it's all fine. It's all how we learn and how we build better applications. I hope you've been able to learn a whole lot about file system, generating user IDs, using the terminal and all that. The next thing we'll be doing in the next video will be all about editing data. So we'll pick this data that we have created in this video and edit them in the next video. I will see you in that one too.